Okay, now you tell me what we're looking at, Andy.
Okay, right now we're looking at, I believe it's a king. Don't swear to it, but I believe it's a king apple tree. It's on a dwarf rooting stock.
And
Probably,
how old do you think it is?
I think it's probably about 8 years old.
And has it been well maintained?
Uh, it has, up to a point, it has, if you pan around here, you'll find there's some disease happening. And this branch here had, when we pruned it last year, it had black rot. Trying to get the snow off it. It had black rot on it, and I see that the disease has not gone away.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take my pruning saw and cut this section out as a first move here in this pruning schedule.
So
there's also another section where it's showing up here. I'm going to take these off. Now those should be taken away and burnt because you can transmit that from tree to tree.
So you need to clean your tools if you're going to be cutting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do. You need to sterilize them. And hydrogen peroxide is a good thing. Just get a spray bottle, spray the tools between trees, just so you're not moving it from one to another. Now, if you pan around, you'll notice there's 3 trees about the same age, and they've all got the same issue. And it shows up as black, a sort of black patch on the trunk.
Yeah, I see that.
And it will then...
How are you going to deal with that one? That's pretty serious.
I honestly don't know. What we could do maybe is come along with a backpack sprayer and spray some fungicide on it. That might help.
Yeah.
But really, once it gets into the tree, it's really hard to get rid of. So there are basically 2 types of tree. We'll deal with one of the other varieties later on. But right now we're dealing with a tree that bears fruit on spurs, and these are the fruiting spurs for this year, which is 2021. That's where we're going to get.
Those are the spurs.
Those are the spurs that will have fruit. Those are fruitful spurs that will open up in May and will have a flower. The bees will pollinate it hopefully, and then around September we should be picking the fruit.
Right.
Now, this particular little twig sticking out here, this is just a vegetative section of the tree. Okay, so if you look up the branch, we've got these fruiting buds, and then we get to these slightly scaly looking ones, and these will only produce leaves.
And how do you tell a growth bud from a fruiting bud?
Usually at this time of the year, it'll be quite obvious where the fruiting buds are slightly swollen, and they have a kind of a furry look to them once they start to open up a little bit.
Okay.
Now, if we want to change this vegetative shoot into a producing section of the branch, then we usually take it back to about 1/3, like this.
Okay.
So we take that back, and as the tree starts to mature, so in this growing season ahead of us, these will gradually become fruitful, and it will then push out another section of vegetative wood. So you can see this is what happened last year.
Yeah.
I cut it there and it produced this, and these are now starting to produce fruitful.
Okay.
Now, if they're too long and weak, we remove them. So
And how much do you remove?
about 1/3 to about 2/3 to 3/4.
Okay.
So we're going to leave 6 buds here. There. So that, if all things go according to plan, this section should start to turn into fruiting wood by the end of 21.
Okay, so you're turning growth wood into fruiting wood.
And at the same time balancing the overall growth of the tree.
You're limiting the growth of the tree, aren't you?
You're limiting the growth of the tree.
Yeah.
Because you don't want it to get to the point where you can't pick.
Right.
And I always say, at this stage of my life, I don't want to be going up and down ladders.
Yeah.
Most people don't. When I started picking apples back in the 80s, we went up 12 and 14-foot ladders regularly. Nowadays, that's a thing of the past.
So this tree would be it wouldn't be a full-size tree. This is a dwarf.
This
Is
is a
it?
dwarf tree, so it's on I believe an M27 rootstock, which is a dwarfing,
Right.
and it will never, as long as it's managed. You can see how it's been shaped. The basic structure has been shaped to keep it about 10 feet, and that's, you don't want it to go any higher.
Yeah.
This one is kind of, I like to pan over to the one beside it. This one's been allowed to get away a little bit. I'm going to have to be a bit ruthless with the top of it, because we don't want to see that going away, otherwise it'll be difficult to pick. We want to keep it, management-wise, we want to keep it in an umbrella shape.
Yeah.
So all parts are exposed to the sun. Don't forget, apple trees are sun-loving. They like full sun
So they're like grapes. You need to
Just
get
like
sun
that.
exposure on everything.
on every corner.
So, as far as the shape of the tree, we're going to try and eliminate anything that's crossing over, right?
Correct.
Is that a general rule?
Yeah, crossing, diseased, broken, or crossing.
Is there anything on this tree that you would say needs to come out?
Well, these ones in here, these chaps in here, you've got a big,
They're growing to the center of the
going to
tree.
the center of the tree, so I'm going to take it off right there.
Right.
And it does two things. It manages the growth, but it also it's allowing the sunlight to get in there, because what's going to happen if you leave these here by the middle of June, this will all have leafed out and there'll be no sunlight coming in here.
And are you going to get some fruit off that you just cut?
No, this is next year's.
So there's no fruit going to be this year?
No, in fact I could even take this back another.
Okay.
So hopefully that will become a fruiting bud next year. But in general, you want to have the fruit sitting on the extremities of the tree
Ah,
so that it gets full sun.
yeah, okay. So you're just going to cut off the shoots that are getting too long on the outside.
Yeah, I'm opening up any areas where the sun is being impeded by water shoots,
Right.
and let's find a better. Here's a good example of what happens when you start taking a large amounts of wood off. Now, this tree was diseased, and somebody had to go at it with a chainsaw, and that's fine and dandy. But you have to remember that tree still has the same root ball, so it's got all that energy coming from the roots, and it has to go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what happens when you cut off large amounts of wood. You get water shoots, and these are non-productive, vegetative, and they'll never be anything
Yeah.
fruitful. So these have got to come off.
So basically you can't do too much in 1 year.
No.
Yeah.
The thing about it is, unlike grapes, where you're reducing everything down to the bare minimum of 8, 10, 12, 16 buds, with trees, apple trees or pear trees, the same thing. You're trying to manage the growth.
Yeah.
And not, once you've got your basic framework in place, you just try and hold it in that pattern.
Yeah.
And just
And apple trees are different than grapes, in that grapes are cut down almost to nothing every year.
Yeah.
Whereas apples, you know, you've maintained a shape that you keep for years and years.
correct.